Boruto has changed the timeline once again. This time Kawaki had his limiters removed long before he was supposed to, which allowed him to save Boruto's life. This implies that Boruto is able to avert his destiny to die, but is that really true? Well, I believe that Boruto will die, but at the hands of someone else, and it all goes back to this future scene revealed in chapter 75. You see, many to this day still believe that the future Momoshiki saw didn't come to fruition, and that is true to some extent. Some believe that the future was changed through actions unknown to the audience, or maybe there was some divine intervention, when the truth is a lot simpler. It wasn't that the future changed from what it was meant to be, but more so that it hasn't happened as yet. And I know that some of you guys are probably saying, well kiddo, how is that possible when those events took place with the younger versions of those characters? Is this some alternate universe nonsense theory? And to that I say, no, definitely not. This more so applies to just one of those future scenes, that being the one with full Otsutsuki form Kawaki. You see, this one panel, and believe me when I say it's this one panel, is why everyone believes that the future changed and Momoshiki's prophecy didn't come to fruition, despite all the other scenes playing out exactly as they were depicted. It seems like a massive oversight on Ikimoto's part, or the future itself did change. But what if it plays into the nature of the character's abilities? I mentioned this before, but the difference between Momoshiki's future sight and Kashin Koji's prescience is that while Koji is able to see all possible futures, Momoshiki is able to see the future. What this means is that whatever Momoshiki sees is going to happen. It is the one timeline that is predetermined, while Koji sees multiple possible timelines that could play out. Now, this might seem contradictory to what took place in the manga itself, since Momoshiki's prophecy seemingly didn't come to fruition. But what if I told you that it did? What if I told you that Momoshiki never saw a future where Boruto lost everything? What he saw were events that could have led to that future. Now, to understand what I mean by this, because this might seem a bit contradictory, because I just said that Koji is the one that sees possible futures, so how is Momoshiki also seeing possibilities? Well, that's because the word could in this context takes on a different meaning. This makes perfect sense once you understand the concept of why, which is very prevalent in Boruto's manga, and also in its main influence, that being the Matrix, which I'm not going to cover again. So if you guys want to learn more about that and get into the deep weeds of the why and all that stuff, go and watch this video after this one. But in a sense, this refers to the underlying purpose or belief that drives a person to do something. It's very simple. And this is very important because it's the driving force behind why Momoshiki thought the future would play out in his favor. It wasn't because he saw a future where it happened, but more so because he couldn't understand why it wouldn't happen. That is why after everything played out in chapter 80, I believe, he said to himself that it wasn't supposed to go like this. Why would Boruto not despair and turn his body over to him when he has nothing left? Why would he continue fighting? Why would Sasuke help Boruto for his daughter's sake, even though he perceives him as an enemy? The concept of why is a constant, and that's because, and this might sound cheesy, but he simply doesn't understand the concept of love and its logic-defined properties. He sees everything through a binary process, so if everyone believes Boruto killed the seventh and he's now the outsider, obviously he would lose everything. But of course, that didn't happen because he couldn't see beyond the point he couldn't understand, which is of course is a Matrix reference. Now this might seem like a giant tangent, or maybe I'm a broken record, but understanding that the future Momoshiki saw didn't change is very important to this new theory that this panel hasn't happened as yet. To put it into context, Boruto saw 6 scenes from the future. The first one was the Jonin in the forest saying he couldn't have gone that far yet, don't let him escape. This then played out in chapter 79, I believe, when Kawaki manifested in the forest after his chakra almost ran out from overusing Tsukinai Kona. The guard said the same thing, he couldn't have gotten very far yet, don't let him escape. This was from Kawaki's perspective, which is very important, so keep that in mind. Now the second scene was of the Akage monument, which could have been from Boruto's perspective, someone else's, or just an overhead view of the day. This makes sense since we just established that Boruto is able to view future events from the perspective of others as well, which is also then backed up by this next scene where Sarada tells Mitsuki that she found him over here. This one played out in chapter 79, which shows Sarada running alongside Mitsuki when she says this, which means that Boruto saw this from Mitsuki's perspective. The fourth scene with Team 10 played out as well, and so did the fifth one with Mitsuki entering Sage Mode. The only one that didn't happen is the one with Kawaki looking down on someone in his horned state with blood seemingly splattered on his face. Now a panel similar to this one did play out in chapter 78, I believe, with Kawaki looking down at Boruto after he blocked his attack. The difference, of course, and it's a very big one, is that there is no blood, and neither is Kawaki in his horned state. So while the positioning of the characters is very similar to some extent, this clearly isn't meant to be this panel, and neither would it validate the theory that Sarada simply changed the future since this happened long before she appeared. Now some would say that Momoshiki simply saw the possible future where Kawaki killed Boruto and Sarada atop the Akage monument that Koji mentioned in chapter 13. But that doesn't make sense since Momoshiki saw the events that took place after Omnipotence with Boruto himself, which is why he thought that he would be able to take over his body. So if that's not the case, what exactly happened to this panel? Did the future change, or is it that it hasn't happened as yet? See, this isn't my theory, by the way. This was brought to my attention by one of you guys on my chapter review, which I'm unable to find because Sueisha hates me for some reason, but Kawaki arrived on the battlefield in his old clothing, the same tattered jacket and undershirt that he had in part 1, and of course had in this specific scene. Now of course Kawaki is 3 years older, I suppose, but his facial structure hasn't really changed, especially from that perspective. The only real difference is that his hair is a bit longer than it was before, but he could simply get a haircut and the scene would line up perfectly. So what if, and I know this is a stretch, but what if this panel was always from further down the timeline, when Kawaki can once again access his horn state? Because at this point in the story it doesn't seem like he's able to, which would explain why he didn't use it against Jura, despite knowing that he's stronger than his current form. It could be the case that he can't enter the form whenever he wants to at this point in time, but he gains the ability to do so in the future, thus this panel right here. I mean, Ikimoto didn't need to have Kawaki change into his part 1 gear for this fight, so why did he? Well, it could be a hint towards the theory that this panel still hasn't happened as yet, and Boruto's life is still in danger. Though it could also be the case that Boruto is seeing this from the perspective of someone else, which we already established was possible using the flash forward scenes of Kawaki and Sarada. So maybe this isn't Kawaki killing Boruto, but instead Konohamaru, Mitsuki, or maybe even Sarada herself. The possibilities are somewhat endless. Though if I was a betting man, I'd put my money on Boruto due to the plethora of death flags he has in the series. The funniest one of course being the one we got in chapter 700 of Naruto's manga, which shows him dangling from a rope that he used to descend upon the stone faces, which from this point of view made it seem as if he offed himself. Now obviously this is more so meant to be a funny gesture, but given the theme of sacrifice surrounding Boruto's character, you could see this as a bit of foreshadowing. You also have the most famous one of course with Kawaki telling Boruto that he will send him where he sent the 7th, which was seen as a death flag for the longest time, and the same thing with Momoshiki's prophecy about him losing everything. I mean, the entire Vesa arc itself was about how Boruto will cease to exist due to Momoshiki's karma, which got progressively worse with each bit of new information. Then there's Sasuke literally asking Boruto if he's willing to die for the village, which he showed to be the case by helping them in the battle versus Ishiki. And of course there's many more, including the countless statements saying that he was going to die at the hands of Jura, which I covered in detail in this video, so check it out if you guys missed it. The point is that I wouldn't be surprised if Boruto dies at the end of this story, since Hikimoto has made it clear that he wants the story to be different from Naruto's. He was questioned recently about some topics on Naruto and Boruto, and one question was if there was any aspects of the drafting process for Naruto and Boruto that were more difficult than your other projects. And he went on to say that unlike Naruto, Boruto was born with a silver spoon in his mouth and had everything he could ever want. Sure, there might be some inconveniences that come with your father being the Hokage, but he didn't start the story with a clear goal like Naruto did. In retrospect, I can see how he might not have come across as an interesting manga protagonist when viewed objectively, at least pre-time skip. Then Kawaki, who is Boruto's complete opposite in many ways, entered the story. He served as a driving force for the plot, and you could even say that he became the de facto protagonist for some portions of the story pre-time skip. Switching places with Kawaki allowed Boruto to shine as a protagonist, so I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. And given the fact that he also doesn't believe in retreading ground already covered by Naruto, as it wouldn't be interesting to him, he might take this to its logical conclusion, which is of course, Boruto kicking the bucket. But I could be wrong, and I know a lot of you guys hate that idea, but it's an idea that's out there. We'll see. But that is it for the video, guys. If you guys liked it, drop a like, and also I apologize for the audio. My voice is not good, as I'm sure you guys can tell right now, which is why I haven't uploaded in like 5 days, but hopefully I get it under control and we can get back to business. But yeah, if you guys liked it, drop a like. If you're new, subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.